Hello, welcome to today's video, which is why you still can't 36-star your Abyss. I'm making this as kind of a sequel to the first part I made, why you can't 36-star your Abyss, because I noticed an uptick in people kind of revisiting or watching that video, even finding my channel through that video. And I think the reason that is because our past couple of Abyss rotations have been,
"You're ugly, you're disgusting, I'm gonna kill you, give me $200.
really rough, to say the least. And I know a lot of players are struggling in the past current Abysses we have, including the one we are currently in, the 3.3 Abyss. So I wanted to make a follow-up video in case you watched the last video and you're still struggling with your Abyss. Also, on top of that, I received some comments on the last video with some tips and some feedback about what some people have done to kind of help in their Abyss. So I'd like to include those tips in this video as well. Before you watch this video, I do recommend checking out the first video I made, the original Why You Can't 36-Star Your Abyss, because that covers the bulk issues that I think most people are probably going to have, and the issues that I think you should try to address first before you go into the things I'm going to talk about in this video. This video is kind of the next step to the previous video, and it's going to include tips that are a little more niche, and it's going to focus more on specific characters, builds, and which characters you should be focusing on if you're in an Abyss mindset. So it's going to be a little more specific, whereas the first video kind of covers bigger issues that players might be having. So if you've already seen that one and you're thinking to yourself, I'm doing all this stuff and I still can't 36-star, then this video is for you. But before we get into it, don't forget to join me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Meejin, M-E-E-J-I-I-N. We do the new Abyss cycle live on stream whenever it comes out, and I always, whenever I have a new team I'm kind of working on, I like to try it out in Abyss. So we're in Abyss a lot. If you have questions, feel free to drop by and ask away. So join us there, and let's get into today's video. Okay, so before we get into the characters and the builds that I would recommend for them if you're in an Abyss mindset, the first thing we're going to cover are a few extra tips that I didn't go over in the first video, just extra little things that you can try to maybe shave off those last few seconds you need in Abyss. So first and foremost, artifacts. Now, I opened my last video by saying that you can do Abyss with fairly mediocre artifacts, and I stand by that. That's true. However, that doesn't mean that you can just get like the 4-piece bonus bare minimum, slap it on, and think you're good. You do still need to try to farm passable artifacts. So one problem you might be having is you just have not spent long enough in artifact domains. I'm going to go over later in the video when I talk about builds, kind of what's more efficient to farm. But the truth is you're just going to have to spend time in various artifact domains, and you might get luckier in some than others. Sometimes you might have to sit your butt down for a long time and farm artifacts. That's just how the cookie crumbles. Also, level them to 20 when you can. I know early game it is difficult. You have few resources that you're working with, but make that the goal. Even if you have a gross piece that you need to complete your 4-piece set, level it as high as you can, and then when you get a better piece, feed it in and you're good to go. All right, next on the list is actually something that someone commented in the previous video. So thank you to you. I mean, how else would I say it? I don't know. I'll put the comment somewhere on the screen, but to sum it up, they were just saying that they were having trouble with like the last 10 seconds and they were stuck at kind of 33 stars. And what pushed them over the edge to be able to help with getting those last few stars is doing something called alt switching. Now, I have heard of this and I actually tried it on stream. I personally don't do this. It's not my cup of tea, because when I started to try it, I was already 36 starring, so I didn't really need those few seconds. And I don't know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. But if you are struggling, it might be worth a try. So essentially what you do is, if you're a PC player, you hold your alt key and you press 1, 2, 3, 4, whichever character you want to switch to. And when you switch, it will automatically burst on that character. So say I'm on my Ito team, I press alt 1, it switches to my Ito, and it'll automatically queue up his burst if he has his burst ready to go. So that can save you possibly some time once you get good at it. It's something that is going to take some getting used to, so keep that in mind. It's not necessarily going to save those few seconds you need right off the bat. It's going to require some practice, a little bit of muscle memory, but some people do prefer it. If you're on mobile, you can do something similar. You just have to press the burst of the character you want to switch to, and it'll automatically switch that character and burst. If you were on console, I think you're out of luck. I'm sorry. I looked, but I don't think there's anything for you. So sorry. So thank you again to Isu. For that one, that little tip, I totally forgot about that because it's not something I do, but it might be exactly what you need to start shaving off some seconds. The next tip that could help you a few seconds is prepping your ults. This is something I actually used to do back when I was cutting it close with just needing a few seconds to get that last star. Basically what you do is you'll go through the first chamber normally, just bursting, trying to get through it as fast as you can, and then you'll have to restart the first chamber. It'll save all your stars, so if you got 3 stars, don't worry, it saves your highest stars. You could get 1 star the next time, it'll still say you have 3. But just restart it, and then as you get closer to the enemy dying, just work on regaining energy to prep all your character's ults. Again, this is kind of a timing thing so that you don't kill your enemy, but you also aren't doing this for way too long. You know, just try to time it correctly so that you can kill the enemy with skills but still get all your ults ready in the meantime. That way you will start the next chamber with everyone's ult ready, and that can really save you a few seconds. That's the trick I used probably the most out of everything in this list when I was first getting close to getting those 36 stars, and when I needed, you know, a few precious seconds. That was probably the number one thing I did. It is tedious to start off every chamber over and over again, but it can save your skin if you want the 36 stars. So that might be something to try as well. Next little problem you might be having, you don't group the enemies. Now when I say group, I don't necessarily mean using an animal character, though that can be extremely helpful. What I'm talking about is running to a specific area in Abyss and letting the enemies come to you and kind of grouping themselves. I employed this method probably the most when, I don't remember what version we were in, but there were those 2 Pyro Heralds, and it was rough. Really, the only built Kaido character I was kind of working with at the time was Xingqiu, so he was kind of all I had to break down their shields when it got to that phase. So if you ran to a specific part in the Abyss, both heralds would come to you and you could kind of deal with them as quickly as possible, grouped together, as opposed to going to one and then having the other one kind of hitting you from behind without taking any damage. But a lot of Abyss cycles are like that, where you have more than one enemy kind of spread out, and what you want to do is run to an area in the arena, group them together. The good news is a lot of people have Abyss tips out there. Pretty much as soon as the new Abyss version drops, you can Google, you know, any kind of game guide, even YouTube. I'm sure you've heard of Sevi Plays. She does excellent Abyss recommendations and tips, so she'll probably mention a place you can run, but it's usually been figured out, so you don't even have to really do a bunch of trial and error yourself. You can just kind of look at where that person's running, run there, group the enemies, kill them all in a fundo bundle. Nice. The next little tip is, for me, kind of an obvious one because I do this naturally, but maybe you don't, and that is you need to organize your character order. So what I mean by that is our fingers definitely do muscle memory, and that's why it makes sense, at least for me, to keep like characters in the same position. For example, my order is always DPS slot 1, healer in slot 2, slot 3 is kind of like a flex, buff, off-field sub DPS kind of a thing, and 4th I save for shields, animal characters that are going to be grouping, stuff like that. Like, that's just how I organize it in my head. How you do it is up to you, but I think it is helpful to have your own version of that in your head, because then you'll just kind of muscle memory know, I'm going to slot 1, that's my DPS, I'm going to slot 2, that's my healer. If I accidentally start a domain or Abyss and I put someone in the wrong spot, I gotta restart, because it grinds my gears when they're not in the right order. So that's worth a try. I assume most people already do that, but you never know. You might be someone who likes to live in chaos, and you might just be choosing randomly. I don't know your life or your story. If you are, try this out, it might help. Another reason you might be struggling is you don't know your enemy. And I mentioned this in my last video, kind of a skill issue, but the thing with skill is it's all about practice. The better you know your enemy, the easier it is for you to kind of predict when they will have their downtime, when you can attack them, where they will move possibly, when they will be invulnerable to your attacks. So just as an example, in this current Abyss, we have the Golden Wolf Lord. I fought him so much I can tell when he's going to come down to the ground and be vulnerable to my attacks. So I prep all my buffing stuff right before he comes to the ground. That way, Ito can attack him for the most time possible, and we can get in and out as quickly as we can. All that kind of stuff can help you, so you can preserve your ult, so you can heal at the right moment, or you can even iframe things. It is piggybacking off the skill thing that I talked about in the last Abyss, but just a little more detail. That's just a practice thing. You might be sitting in Abyss for a long time. C'est la vie, try your best. The final reason you might be struggling in Abyss is that you always choose the same characters when the Abyss cycle kind of dictates what will work in that cycle and what will not. Now, I don't exactly practice what I preach here. I'm a hyper investor. I hyper invest in a few select characters, and that's it. All my eggs, one basket. I'm carrying it. it's fragile. Please do not run into me. But yeah, basically I kind of just like ham fist my way through any abyss with the exact same teams. And I have done that for months. Pretty much ever since I started 36 starring. I bring my Ito team and my Tartago's national team. Gets me through. When you reach a point where you've invested so much in characters that they can just kind of get through anything, then obviously you don't really need to be watching this video. But initially, it might be better for you to kind of switch up your teams based on what's going to work best in that cycle. For example, in 3.3, the Jade Plume Terror Shroom is particularly vulnerable to Dendro, Electro, reactions like that. So I went in with my Tartago's team, which has a lot of Pyro, and that thing burned up and it got angry and it stomped at me and it almost killed my Tartagos. I redid that floor later with a Hyper Bloom team, Nahida, Kuki Shinobu, Xingqiu, and Venti, and they smoked it. Because of the Dendro, the Terror Shroom just flopped down. It was totally inactive. It gives you a chance to hit it, and it didn't get all angry and stompy at me, and I wasn't close to death. So that team was better in that instance. However, I realized that if you were earlier game, you might just have fewer options to begin with. So you might not be able to necessarily pick and choose from a bunch of characters, because even if you have those characters that might work well in that cycle, they might not be built at all and not ready. That leads me into the next part of this video, which is universal characters, both 4 stars and 5 stars, that I believe everyone should build on their account because they will absolutely help you and carry you through Abyss. So let's get into that portion of the video. Okay, so first and foremost, if you're in Abyss mindset and you're thinking about what do you need to 36 star, you need to focus on 2 teams. In each of those teams, you will need a DPS character, damage per second. You can choose just about any character you want to be your DPS. Some work better than others, obviously. Some do way more damage than others, are just stronger, easier to build, or just have a lot of power, low constellations. But at the end of the day, you should really choose what character you enjoy, and that could be just about anyone. For me personally, it is Arataki and the one and only Ito. And I also have Tartagos that I run on my national team. Although last round I ran Nahida and it was awesome, but that's a different story. I'll get into that in a minute. Basically pick 2 DPS characters to focus on. In a second, I'll go over the universal supports, but just note that depending on the DPS you choose, you will have to level a support that is possibly more niche towards them. For example, in the universal support section, I will not be mentioning Goro because he's not really a universal support. He buffs geo damage. So if you choose to run someone like Ito, then you're going to want to build a Goro to go alongside him. Even though I don't mention it in the universal support, do your research on the DPS you choose because they might have a specific support niche that they need filled. Yoimiya, for example, will need a Yunjin. I don't mention her. Animo DPS like Zhao, Hazel, you might want to run a Faruzan nowadays. So that's the first part you want to cover. DPS of your choice, supports that you need for that specific DPS. And then you might want to move into the characters I'm about to talk about, the universal support characters that can carry you through just about anything. Alright, so Bennett, is anyone surprised? If you followed my channel for any length of time, you will know that I am very, very sensitive about Bennett. I love him to death. Out of every character in this game, if I could only recommend one to you to build, it would be Bennett. Bennett is amazing. I cannot stress it enough. This is not just an I love him thing. There are reasons, okay? First of all, he's an amazing attack buffer. Use his ult. Fantastic Voyage. He will buff the attack of the other character standing in his circle. Depends what level you're at. If you're the highest level possible, which is a crown C5, you're gonna get 119% attack buff, which is awesome. On top of that, his burst heals, which is like attack buff and healing. How much better can it get? Well, let me tell ya, Bennett has amazing sub DPS capabilities. You can run him as a DPS too. I do that myself. But in terms of support, you can build him to be an attack buffer, still heal enough, but also have amazing sub DPS capabilities. That is 3 things in one character. You only have 4 slots on a team, right? Bennett does so much for one character. That is why he's so good. They are never going to make another character like Bennett. If you've been avoiding him, this is your wake-up call. Get on the Bennett bus. It's amazing, okay? It's comfortable. There's lots of room. We got comfy seats. We don't know where we're going, but it's a fun ride. Seriously, build your Bennett. I cannot recommend it enough. If I had to pick any one character to go through the day with, all by himself, it would be Bennett. Very quickly, build-wise, what you're gonna want. You will want, who is this? I'm busy. Skylar, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I'm busy right now. The higher base attack you can get, the better, because Bennett's attack buff is based on his base attack. So it is this stat right here. The green does not matter. All the green numbers come from artifacts, stuff like that. That's why building attack on your Bennett does not matter for his buff. Only this number matters, and only this number is affected by his level and the weapon he holds, which is why you want a high base attack weapon. Aquila Favonia is the fan favorite because you can get it from a standard banner. So if you pulled one, it has a really high base attack. You can slap that on him. It is physical damage bonus, which he does not get the most out of. If you're using him as a full support, that will buff your character to the max. Miss Splitter is obviously great because it leans into other aspects that I talked about. You'll get some crit damage on him. You'll be able to feed into that sub DPS capability, as well as buff the max that you can. If you do not have either of those weapons, any energy recharge weapon is going to be good too. Favonius is a classic because you can funnel particles to the rest of your team and be kind of a battery on top of everything. And Bennett needs enough energy to be using his burst as often as you can. So Favonius is great. If you have a sack, I'd save it for your Xingqiu. We'll talk about that later. Skyward Blade's an option as well if you have it and you want that energy recharge. But to be honest, if I did not have Aquila or Miss Splitter or one of the other high base attack weapons, like if you've been playing long enough to have Festering Desire, I would probably just slap a Favonius on him because he does need that energy recharge. Artifacts, universal I'd recommend. 4-piece Noblesse Oblige. He can get really good use out of it because Bennett can burst so frequently and have really high uptime. You'll be getting a lot of attack boost on top of the boost you're already giving with his buff. So this is the universal set I would recommend for him. If you're running DPS Bennett or sub DPS Bennett, you could slap Crimson Witch on him. If someone else in your team has Noblesse, for example, like maybe you have a Noblesse on Xingqiu and you want sub DPS Bennett, you can slap Crimson Witch on him. But for most people, Noblesse is the way to go. Next character I want to talk about, Xiangling, another classic in the national team. By the way, in case you don't know what a national team is, it is Bennett, Xiangling, Kazuha, Sucrose, depends what you have, and then kind of a flex DPS. So I run Tartiggles National, which is Tartiggles is the DPS. You can run the Raiden Shogun National, which would be the Raiden Shogun, and then those other 3 characters. You can really slot a lot of characters. It is very versatile. That's why it's so good. And Xiangling is a big part of why it's so good. She's an excellent character because she does amazing off-field damage. She can proc a lot of reactions with her Pyro Nado. And on top of that, depending on what weapon you give her, you can kind of use her as a battery as well, which leads me into what weapons you should run on her. She needs a lot of energy recharge. I run Favonius on mine because it helps me collect particles for herself and for other characters when I need it. She kind of acts as a battery in my team. You could run more of a damage-based weapon if you wanted to, like Staff of Homa, but to be honest, save that for your DPS because Xiangling works perfectly well with the Favonius Lance. You could run the catch on her, but like I said, you'll be funneling particles with the Favonius Lance, so it's really quite good. And on top of that, it is free-to-play friendly because it is a 4-star. Artifacts, I recommend Emblem and pretty much nothing else. Emblem is really good on Xiangling because she needs a lot of energy recharge if you want to keep that uptime as much as possible. If you absolutely do not have Emblem because other characters are maybe using it, something like that, Crimson Witch is an option. But like I talked about earlier with when you're farming artifacts, some artifact domains are more worth farming in terms of your resin, and Emblem is one of them because it's so universal and you can use it at the Shimenawa set if you have a character that can use it, as opposed to Crimson Witch, which has Lava Walker, and that's totally useless. So your resin's better spent in Emblem, so farm more in Emblem. Xiangling will really get a lot of use out of this set. Baby boy Xingqiu, he's another great option. Like Xiangling, he also does amazing off-field damage. His rain swords also have the little extra nugget of being able to shield you a little bit and heal you a little bit. Not enough to rely on, but like, I don't know, it's kind of nice. But yeah, the reaction damage you can get off this guy is fantastic, especially in like a vape team. It's amazing. If you can get C6 too, it just gets even better. So he is a absolutely must build in my opinion. The top tier weapon for Xingqiu is going to be a sack sword because like Xiangling, he needs a lot of energy recharge, and being able to proc his E skill twice is so helpful. I have about 215 energy recharge on my Xingqiu, and when I skill twice with the E, I can go from 0 burst to full burst. So that's why it's such a good weapon. Again, Favonius is another great option if you do not have a sack sword. Again, he can act as a battery if you put this on him instead. The second you get a sack sword though, I would give it to Xingqiu first before any other character. Artifacts, here it is again, Emblem. I've tried a mix of Xingqius. I've tried full Noblesse, I've tried some Heart of Depth, and for me personally, just based on the Emblem I have, this has been better damage-wise for him. But you can run a few different sets. You could do Emblem, like I said, Heart of Depth, full Noblesse if no one in your team has it. The only problem I'll say with the full Noblesse is Xingqiu cannot burst as often as someone like Bennett can, so you're not getting that attack buff as often. That's why it's so good on Bennett, but it definitely is an option if it's what you have. Sucrose, another classic. I feel like Sucrose can kind of get swept under the rug because, you know, we have other animals that have come out that kind of do a similar role, but as a 4-star option, she's phenomenal. Sucrose, you should be building off Elemental Mastery. Mine is built like garbage right now because my EM stuff's on Venti and Kazuha, so I'm sorry. But basically, you can proc mad reactions when you use your Sucrose. She also groups because she's an animal character, sucks your enemies together. It can be very helpful. Weapon Sack Fragments is excellent on her because she also has a high energy requirement wouldn't you know? And getting an extra proc on the skill is helpful. If you have C1 Sucrose, you'll get another charge on that E. So that means if you proc your sack, you can get 3 uses out of a single E skill, which is really, really good for the energy. Like I said, it's hard to fill that requirement, so that's really nice on her. If you don't have sack, you can run Magic Guide for the Elemental Mastery. You could also do a Witsith, that's an option too. Definitely not my preferred build. If you have a sack, I would go with that first. Artifacts, we're running 4-piece VV. I think really that's the only way to go with Sucrose. Sucrose can be your Animo. She'll have the VV so she can shred. Easy done. The last 4-star character I want to talk about is one I recently built myself. You can check out that video. I'll link it in the eye in the description below as well. Diona is like Betty in the sense that she fulfills a few roles that makes her useful in terms of being kind of a space saver on a team. Her E skill here shields and her alt heals, and she does a good job at both. And she's really not that hard to build, like just stack HP on her and you're pretty much good to go. Weapon wise, I run sack because again, more high energy requirements, and if you get that second proc, it is helpful. But Favonius Warbow, great weapon too, more universal support, particles, blah 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 blah, you get the drill. You could probably also run something like Stralius on her if you wanted Elemental Mastery boost, if you're going for that specific build. But in terms of a universal support build, I'd recommend a Sacrificial Bow or the Favonius Warbow. Artifacts, really flexible. I talked about this more in my Diona video and I tested a few different builds as well, but the one I landed on personally, 2-piece Tenacity, 2-piece Ocean Hued Clam for the healing bonus. If no one else in your team has Noblesse, that could be an option, but personally I found the 2-piece from the Tenacity particularly helpful in boosting that HP so that her shield is beefier, and the healing bonus on the Clam I found helpful for the healing capability. So I'm trying to lean into both aspects of her kit. That's why I chose this. You could also choose like Maidens or something. I had that earlier too, way back in the day. You could even run Emblem on her. She's an Emblem user as well, but a lot of the characters I mentioned use Emblem, so I would put that on them first and then put maybe a 2-piece on your Diona. Kind of save your Emblem for some other characters there. All right, let's talk about the 5 stars. Now, when I'm talking about the 5 stars, I don't want you to feel like you have to pull for them, but there are definitely 5 stars that will make your life easier if you're looking for support-driven, helpful, and Abyss characters. The first one is Nahida, the Dendro Archon. I love her so much more than I thought I did. She's phenomenal. She does so much off-field damage. It is insane. She is the absolute queen of Dendro reactions. No surprise there. She's the Archon. But going from like the Dendro Traveler to her, it's like night and day. The extent that she can proc those reactions and the damage she can do is just, it's wild. If you're looking for a Dendro support, she is it. You could also make her a DPS. Obviously, her best in slot's going to be her signature weapon, 1000 Floating Dreams. I went for that, lost both on the weapon banner, so here we are. So I'm running Magic Guide, which is a 3-star weapon and works so well, crazy well. It's wild. I actually was testing it between this guy here, the Lost Prayer. I know this is only level 70, so it's not exactly a fair test, but the difference was so much night and day to begin with that I'm just sticking with Magic Guide. It just works that well. So that's absolutely an option. Lost Prayer is an option, not to say you can't use it. Witsith an option too. If you wanted to, you could probably run Sack too. There's a lot of different builds for her. She's pretty versatile, but I've been loving Magic Guide. It's been amazing. Artifacts, the Deepwood Memories 4-piece is excellent if no one else in your team has it. If someone else does have a Dendro set and they can't really get use out of a different set, then you could run something like Gilded on Nahida for the Elemental Mastery. I found Deepwood is excellent. I have not tried Gilded to be fair, but this works great. Next, we got another Archon, Kel's Surprise. The Archons are strong. I mean, what can be said about Zhongli really other than he's the best shield in the game, and he also provides a shred, which is not super common amongst characters. On top of being the top shielder, you can also build into damage capabilities, which is what I do with my Zhongli. On top of having enough HP to provide a pretty chonky shield, I don't think I've ever seen it break. We have a pretty healthy crit rate, crit damage ratio, so that when he ults, it's worth it. If you don't have a good crit ratio, his ult takes so much time that it might not even be worth doing. So in that case, you could skip it, but if you want kind of a hybrid build, then you can do that too, and he slaps. I run Staff of Home on my Zhongli. I don't think I could ever pry it from him. Works amazingly. I would say this is best in slot for shield and damage capability build, but Vortex Vanquisher would also work. I don't have that one here. Favonius would be okay too if you want a particle funnel, get some energy, that would be fine. Black Tassel is the more friendly free-to-play option. You got HP as the stat here. It's not amazing for the passive. I mean, how often are you fighting slimes in Abyss? Not too often, but it is good for the HP if you're building pure shield bot Zhongli. It is absolutely an option. Artifacts, I would not recommend anything other than the 4-piece Tenacity. He gets the best use out of it. It was made for him. Next, the best boy Kazuha. I think a lot of people underestimated him when he first came out. You could build Kazuha a few different ways. The way I do it right now is full EM, but I have done a hybrid damage build in the past. It is definitely possible. Kazuha's main role is to buff other characters by making elemental reaction damage stronger. Kazuha's amazing for for grouping enemies. He really just bundles them all together and helps you do some beefy damage. His best in slot's gonna be Freedom Sword, his signature weapon, but you can absolutely run a lot of other weapons on him. They've done some events where they have sack on him, which is actually pretty fun because you can get the double suck going on. I used to run Iron Sting before I had Freedom Swarm because it's got that elemental mastery. That worked well too. Favonius works as well. If you're struggling with energy recharge, I would actually recommend probably Favonius over Iron Sting because the more you can ult, the more damage you will do in the long run, even if the numbers you're not doing within the ult are as big because you have a lower EM that you had to sacrifice. In the end, it can add up to be more because you are doing your ult more frequently. Artifacts for Piece VV, same as Sucrose. Same drill. The last character I want to talk about is the Raiden Shogun. Out of all the 5-stars I've mentioned, I would honestly say that she is the least universal of the universal characters. That might be a biased take. I know some people probably cannot live without their Raiden Shogun. I almost never use mine, but she is incredible for off damage capabilities, and she is a phenomenal battery. She'll help get your other characters' ults up in no time. It is crazy. She's amazing in that way. And of course, you can build her DPS, so she's doing a heck of a lot of damage. I personally just, I don't know, never fell in love with her, so I don't use her that often, but that's not to say she's not amazing. Her best in slot would be her weapon, the Engulfing Lightning, but the catch is totally fine on her as well. That's what I use. Again, Favonius is a great option. This is the one instance where I would say you don't really need Favonius. The great thing about Favonius is you're getting particles for your team, but the Shogun is such a great battery on her own that I really don't think you need a Favonius. It might be better used on another character. I prefer to use the catch for that reason. It can boost her damage, and she does not need to funnel a bunch of particles because she's already battering everything like crazy. You could also run a crit-based weapon like Staff of Homa, Deathmatch even. All of that could work. She's pretty flexible as well. Artifacts, the only way to go in my eyes is a 4-piece emblem. Set was made for her. What can I say? It's the best in slot for her. And like I said, because so many of these characters use emblem, it is not a waste of your resin to go sit in that domain. You can really spread it around amongst a bunch of different characters. So that does it for why you still can't 36-star your Abyss. I hope that if the first video wasn't enough for you, that some of these tips here maybe can help you save the last few seconds that you need. Once again, if you have any other suggestions, please feel free to comment them. It helped last time, and maybe you'll get in the video with some tip I didn't even think of. And everyone has different ideas that maybe can help. Of course, if you still have questions, feel free to ask them below. I'm always happy to help when I can. I know that these past few abysses have been particularly challenging, and I know that a lot of people are frustrated, and I hope that some of these tips can help you get the last couple stars you need. That about does it for today. Don't forget to join me on twitch.tv/Meejin. If you have any Abyss questions, that's a great place to ask because I am live right there in the moment and I can answer you right then. And that about does it for me today. I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! But before we get into it, doink.